By now, you all have had a chance to see one of 4 videos, I think it is, on how to charge your Tesla. So you at least have some basis. But so looking back on those videos kind of begs the question, should I buy an EV or not? That's really where you need to start, is where do I really want to do this? So let me break this down into several sections and we'll go from there. So first of all, I assume that you're already driving a car. I mean, it stands to reason you're going to replace some ICE or internal combustion engine vehicle with an EV or electric vehicle. So the first question is, how do you currently drive your car? And so the side question that is, so if I get an EV, will I have what? How do I word this? Where I'm going is, say you want to keep your old car and you buy a new one. Okay, fine. So that implies some differences in how you might handle it. So that's the first section, is how do you plan to drive this EV? The second question I would ask you is, or you should ask yourself, is, where are you going to park this car? Okay. So part of the answer of how am I going to park this car leads into how I will recharge this car. How will I put energy into this car? Okay. And then I'm going to treat y'all to a side topic, and that is how to recharge when I'm out on a trip. Because I'm hoping that at least a fair number of y'all are looking towards at least a day trip with a car, or at least a trip to I live just west of Austin. I live in Lago Vista. So let's say I'm taking a trip down to Houston, or I'm taking a trip to Dallas. Those are both out there and back in the day, depending on how long you'll be where you're going. Okay, so that's that. Let me go from that. From my viewpoint, if you can go somewhere that far, so Houston is 150 miles each way, so that's a 300-mile round trip. There will be charging for that trip. So the question comes down to, so if you could make a day trip, you have all the basics you need to make a multi-day trip. Okay. So those are the things I'm going to try to cover. I'll try to be as brief as possible, to the point, as much to the point as possible, although I always tend to stumble over my words and get sidetracked. I'll try to keep it straight. But it's really questions that you need to ask yourself and answer for yourself. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first question is, how will I drive the EV? Okay. The first thing you need to think about is, well, how do you drive your current vehicle? Now, if you don't currently drive a vehicle, then chances are you depend upon commercial transportation for most things. And so you might just use an EV to replace commuting to work and back and forth. Or maybe not. Depends on what you're doing. Okay. So I try to break it down into, am I driving to work and back? Or maybe you stay at home and you take care of the kids, so then you're just driving to school, driving to the grocery store, and that kind of stuff. Okay. The other thing is, are you going to do longer trips? Now, a longer trip may be just, say I live in Lago Vista, I'm going down to San Marcos, go to the outlet mall and back. So that doesn't require anything special except for realizing how far it is and making sure that you have enough energy to make that trip. Okay. Of course, then there's longer trips. Longer trips will require recharging, obviously. Okay, so I really try to look at it and what's my daily use. So let's be fair. I am currently retired, so my daily use, I don't have a daily use. So 3-4 times a week, I drive from Lago Vista into Cedar Park to go shopping. Okay. I go visit a friend a couple of times a week who's further into Austin. Okay. Still, all those trips, relatively short trips. I mean, nothing you would think about. As long as you had enough energy to go, you would go. And that's what those trips are. Okay, so daily use. Work commutes, longer driving, occasional trips. Okay. Let's go from there. I'm not really answering the real question you have, but the first thing is to break down what kind of trips do you make and how many miles are they, and try to add them up. This leads into the question of, will my vehicle be able to handle it? Okay, so the next question I would want you to think about is, where am I going to park? Now, where's where I'm going to park make a difference? Well, first of all, although I'm answering part of the question that comes next, is if I'm parking in a garage, then I probably have access to power to charge in the garage. I mean, a personal garage, personal house. Okay, not a parking garage. Okay, so if I own my own house and I have an attached garage with power in the garage, then I at least have the capability to recharge my car in the garage. The other reason why I asked this question is the car's battery will take actions to either warm itself up or cool itself off to protect itself. So if it's parked inside, it's probably a more reasonable temperature. Okay, I live in Lago Vista, so there's a mix. In the summer, oh yeah, 100 degrees outside, happens. In the winter, every once in a while, gets below freezing, yes, happens. In both of those cases, a car parked outside will be working harder to protect itself. And if it's working harder, it's using energy. So, that's a consideration. Now, the other thing is, I've already told you I live in a house that has its own garage. But I have trees outside, so if I park under those trees, sometimes they drop sap, and the sap sticks to the paint. It's a pain to get off. It can ruin your paint, actually. There's also oak trees, so that means there are leaves. Leaves get stuck into the air conditioning intakes, and that kind of reduces that effectiveness. So that's not pleasant. But though that's true with any car. The main point is, with an EV, it helps to park it in the garage so it's better protected, and the car is better prepared to handle the situations. Use less energy. Okay. There you go. So parking. So if you've gotten this far, I started with, how am I going to recharge my car? Or how am I going to put energy back in the car? So I've already, in each of my videos, the 120 volt, the 240 volt, and the wall charger videos, I've talked about the pluses and minuses of each one of those. But at this point, the main focus is on what do I really need to handle driving a car. So let me go out on a limb here and say, maybe you drive 10 miles to work and 10 miles back. Okay, let's just say that. And 3 times a week, you may stop off at H-E-B or whatever grocery store you might stop off at. Okay. If I'm able to park my car in the garage for 14 hours and charge it for 14 hours. On a 120 volt outlet, I should get around 14 kilowatts. 14 kilowatts at around 3 miles per kilowatt should yield me around 42 miles of range that I've added to a vehicle charged up during that time. Okay. 14 kilowatts, 42 miles of range, so if I'm just doing a 10 mile to work and 10 miles back, that works out. You're fine. Or in the case of a friend of mine, drive to Costco and back. That's probably just a little bit further than that, but I mean, each trip you'd have to think about. Okay. Obviously, each additional hour you can spend on a charger adds another kilowatt, puts you in a better position. But that's the way I would look at it is if 50 miles in that range is sufficient for daily use, then just if you have a 120 volt outlet in your garage, just get a portable connector and hook up and charge it overnight, and that'll work. Now, we start getting into a little bit more of a issue if you're going more miles. Okay, so in the 240 volt charging video, I talked about hooking up to my dryer port. My dryer port's a 1430. It runs at 30 amps, I think. Okay, so that brings in 6 kilowatts an hour. Now, almost any driving I would do, the 6 kilowatt per hour was sufficient. Now, that was done also with a portable connector plugged into the 1430 port out in the dryer room. So that was fine. The other question you might have is, but what about convenience? So having to back into your garage and have a door open between the garage and the utility room is a waste of energy for the house itself. Okay. But, I mean, it works. It's just it's not as convenient as other situations might be. So the third option, and the one I always wanted to go to long-term anyway, was doing a wall charger. But a wall charger all of a sudden is adding expense. It's you're having to have an electrician come out and run the wires. And that's all adding up. Now, you could have an electrician come out and just drop a 1450 plug in your garage, and then you get a wall charger that uses a 1450 plug to connect it. The wall charger I have, and all the Tesla wall chargers are they're hardwired, as they say. So you have to have an electrician attach it as well. But once it's attached, once it's going, it's convenient. It's great. Okay. Now, let's say you're leasing your house, so you're not going to be able to do that kind of work maybe. Negotiate with your landlord maybe, I don't know. I mean, for landlord, his house all of a sudden has more value if it has a 1450 plug out in the garage. But that's where you use a 120 volt connector and see if you can work with that. Okay, so this is what you would do normally on a daily basis. Now, for some of you all, the answer is going to, so the reason why you charge at home. Now, not all of you who are watching this, this won't matter to you, this won't match what you have, but I pay 11 cents per kilowatt here in Lago Vista on Pedernales Electric. So that's my daily rate. It's a flat daily rate. I don't have tiered pricing or anything like that. On top of that, Pedernales had a program where you could sign up to get at least some of your electricity from solar power. So I am signed up on that. I don't think they made an adjustment once I started charging my car, but whatever. It's at least some of the energy going into my car is coming directly from solar. Now, chances are they probably have more power coming to solar for me, but they haven't told me that. And it doesn't make a difference on what the price is to me. Okay. So, if you're buying an EV, you really want to charge as much as you can at home to take advantage of that lower price. Now, for some of y'all, you'll want to use a DC fast charger. In the case of a Tesla, that's called a supercharger. Okay, I mean, I get it. It's not always convenient. It's not always great. Before you commit to that, think about what you're doing. Okay, because when you start getting the higher prices of DC fast charging or supercharging, you're not really saving any money. But that's another point. That is actually the point. Okay. So let's say you haven't figured out how to handle this in any other way except using the superchargers. Okay. My closest supercharger from Lago Vista is in Cedar Park. It's 18 miles away. It's actually a version 3. So there's version 2 is a 150 kilowatt hour. Version 3 is 250 kilowatt hours. So it's just faster, right? More efficient. So, say you live in an apartment, you have no better way to do this. So, you're going to pay more. And I think my cost in Cedar Park is somewhere around 38 cents per kilowatt, which actually is not really that bad compared to other places. Other places are closer to 50 cents. But so it's not all that bad, but you also have to go out to that supercharger, spend the time at the supercharger charging up. So it's like being at a gas station, right? So it's whatever. If that's what your situation is, and you still want to get a Tesla, that's cool with me. Just know that. So regardless of how you charge, Tesla recommends you don't charge over 90%. I've had friends recommend you don't charge over 80%. And I have a friend who says he typically leaves his cars at 50%. But 50% is more for storage. Okay, whatever. So what I've chosen somewhere in the middle of all that, so I limit my charges to 70% charge. Okay. Now, since I have a garage and I have a portable, have a wall charger, if I were to leave town for a week or 2 weeks, and this is something you probably should think about, if I leave town for a couple of weeks and I leave my Tesla in the garage, I'd probably set my charge limit to 50% and just plug it in, leave it plugged in. So cars do drain energy a little bit from time to time. It all depends upon the weather outside, and that's why it's parked in the garage. But you'd have it plugged in so it can regain some energy if it goes down. Okay, whatever. Storage is an important thing. That's why if you go to the airport, you probably want to plug in and leave it plugged in over the period of time you're gone. A day or two won't matter. But for 2 weeks, I don't think you really want to take that chance. If you drain the battery, there's a greater chance that the battery could be damaged. So don't leave it stored with less than 20% in your battery. Don't store it with more than 80% in the battery. If you charge up to 100%, try to be driving almost immediately as soon as you unhook from the charger. Now, they do have something called LFP, lithium iron phosphate. that should have a higher resistance to problems. And actually, number of charges it can take is much higher, about more than double. But anyway, that's another subject. There you go. So we've kind of covered how to charge. Okay, so I've touched on taking trips. The question is, how do I plan for it? Okay. So I'm only going to deal with Tesla. That's what I have. I have a Tesla Model Y. I wasn't able to convince Volkswagen to sell me an ID4 at the time I was looking. So, I mean, I would have a different experience otherwise. So anyway, to the point, if you're in a Tesla, all you do is you put in the location, and Tesla will compute the route and recommend the superchargers that you should visit on the way if it's required. Okay. It tends to be somewhat conservative. It'll shoot for like 13-14%. You really could go down to 5%. It will try to limit how long you spend at each supercharger, and it's much faster. So, yeah. So, taking a sidetrack on this, when you charge up at a version 3 supercharger, the first 50% goes much faster than the second 50%. And the last 30% will take much longer than any other time charging your battery. So you don't want to wait for it to go above 70%. I mean, it'll just take forever. And what's the point? I mean, yes, those of us who drive gas or diesel vehicles, we're used to filling it up until the thing clicks. Okay, I get it. But you don't have a difference in how fast the fluid is flowing in. I mean, maybe there might be a slight difference right at the top where there may be more resistance from the air, but you probably don't notice it. If you charge at a supercharger, you will see, so it will tell you how many kilowatts it's pushing in at any one moment. So with that number, when you get up above 70%, oh gosh, let's say I came in, I only had 5% left in my battery, and I've been driving for 2 hours, so the battery's good and warm, it's preconditioned, it's ready to go. It started tripping along, it's a version 3, so it started tripping along at 250 or close to 250 kilowatts. And in 5 minutes, it'll start dropping down to 230, and then 10 minutes will be down around 200. I don't know exactly, I don't have the charging curve exactly in my mind, so we call that a charging curve, is how much energy it adds over time. So if you go to the YouTube channel is State of Charge, or Out of Spec Reviews, those guys do a great job explaining how all this works. I watch what they say, but I'm closer to a regular driver where I don't really care. Where else am I going to be? I've pulled into this supercharger, I'm going to charge here. Now, I will listen to their advice when it drops below 100 kilowatts, maybe it's time to move on. So, if things are warm, I'll do that. But anyway, whatever. You don't have to get all wrapped up in it. Just be aware of it. It's a lot easier to think of it as if I'm trying to push energy in over 70%, I'm wasting time. And that's the way I see it. And that's the way they see it. So it's okay. There we go. So I start out with, so you put in your destination, let Tesla plan the trip. If you want to go side trips, I think they've added that. What I tend to do is I tend to put in each destination as I go. You just have to keep in mind is, do I have enough energy to get to the next closest supercharger? So I'll add those in as I go. Okay. But the Tesla planning will put in an initial guess at it. Okay, so I've touched on preconditioning. You want your battery to be warm. As the one guy basically said, batteries are like humans. We like temperatures to be around 70, 80 degrees. Now, the battery actually likes it to be a little bit warmer than that, but if it drops below 70 degrees, it's too cold. Okay. And if you see it's a Tesla, if you see a blue snowflake icon next to your battery on your dash, that means it's too cold and it's going to need some warming up. Now, can you plug in? Yes. But it's first thing it's going to do is start warming up the battery so it can accept charge. So it's better to drive a little bit further if you can. That's some of the mistakes I made when I went to Boston and it was cold. Sometimes the battery was just too cold. But anyway, Tesla will plan the trip for you. Oh, I started out with, and they tend to be somewhat conservative on their numbers. So they'll plan for you arriving like 13, 14%, and they'll have you leaving within 30 minutes. Okay, to leave within 30 minutes, definitely follow that. As long as you get enough charge that you can feel comfortable with moving on, move on. Don't try to overcharge your battery. Okay. Now, I've already said 70%. You should move on. Here's the other side of that coin. Yes, you can go to 100%, which is basically overcharging your battery. Every time you go to 100%, you're throwing a lot of heat into that battery, with it being a lithium, NMA, a nickel, manganese, cobalt, aluminum. With it being that type of battery, the more heat you throw into that battery, the shorter its life. And the Tesla battery warranty, I think, is 8 years, 120,000 miles. And so if it drops below 70% availability, then you get to replace the battery. Now, I don't know how the warranty claim is going to work if they come back and say you abused the battery. Now, chances are you are not going to have a problem with this whatsoever in a Tesla. Even if you charge to 100% every day. I mean, the person that buys your car used, yeah, they may be not so happy, but you won't have a problem with it. Okay. So anyway, there you go with that part. How much daily, trips. This is about trips. Preconditioning. So the other part I wanted to add was a little discussion. Say you don't believe me that you should buy a Tesla. Say that you don't want to listen to somebody else. Or say that, the latest XYZ car is the prettiest car, the best looking, the whatever it is that you want to value more. Okay. Chances are, if you're in North America, it has a CCS1 plug. So, CCS1, there are multiple CCS1 options depending upon where you live. But chances are, if you're taking a trip across the United States of America, you're looking at Electrify America. Electrify America, when it works great. The problem is, and a lot of people drive with no problem whatsoever. I don't know how. I mean, I don't have that much personal experience with it. I have done a few charges on Electrify America on my car. I have an adapter to do that. But I always have a bailout option to go to a supercharger. if there's Electrify America in the area, chances are there's a supercharger not very far away. So it's not a problem for me. But anyway, so CCS1. The first thing I would say for CCS1 is there is an app you can put on your phone called PlugShare. PlugShare will allow you to find all the various places you can go to in your area or where you're going that you can charge your vehicle. PlugShare, I think you can plan a route. There's another app called A Better Route Planner. A Better Route Planner is a route planner. So you tell what kind of car you have and what kind of options you want for charging, and it will plan a route for you. So that works out great. And so I mentioned Electrify America. If you're using Electrify America, apply to Electrify America, get their app, and do what you need to with that one. Okay. There's other options. So EVgo appears to be a pretty reasonable organization, but they won't support a multi-state trip. And there's something called ChargePoint. ChargePoint tends to be they sell the chargers, but they don't own them, which means wherever you find the ChargePoint charger, that business owns that. And so it's up to them to get it repaired. But anyway, so ChargePoint. So I have a ChargePoint app. There's actually a ChargePoint in Cedar Park. It's much slower than Supercharger, but it's there. EVgo, I'd have to go to Round Rock to get to the nearest one, but it's there. EVgo, I mentioned you. Oh, so EVgo is also in Round Rock, come to think of it, at the Outlet Mall. And there's another one at the Outlet Mall down in San Marcos. So EVgo, I think, is moving towards that, but it's not there. The other thing is, if you were to look at a Chevy or Ford, there's been some talk of the dealerships having DC fast chargers at the dealerships. Not exactly clear how that will work, but at least it'll allow them to say you can charge here. Okay, so that works to some extent. Anyway, I would tend to use PlugShare to find the chargers. I would tend to use a Better Route Planner for planning the route. Now, some vehicles do a good job. So one of those things you might, but I got to have that. Maybe a Porsche Taycan. I get that. That's a pretty car. And to tell you the truth, if I get a Porsche Taycan with the station wagon treatment, I forgot exactly what they call it, but I mean, that'd be great. But I'd still want to use my Model Y for going across country. But anyway, I'm getting well around the tracks. I'm sorry for you guys. But anyway, there you go. So on a trip, how to recharge. We covered about setting the max limits. I would think about that. But where I really started with all this was, how are you going to use your EV? That sets your guidelines for how you want to plan for it. Where will I park? Is the main part of that really is, where am I going to plug it in? Because you'll want to plug in at home most of the time. It'll be far cheaper and far better for your battery. Because running on a 240 volt recharge is much easier on the Life. Okay, there you go. This obviously is going to get to be much longer than I intended it to be, but I'm hoping that it's helpful and helps guide you in where you're going. Good luck.